Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. So, have you ever just poured your absolute heart and soul into learning a new language, or picking up an instrument, or maybe trying to master a tough business skill, only to feel like you've hit a massive brick wall? You know the feeling, right? You're putting in the time, but the progress just isn't showing up. Well, today, we're exploring a perspective shift that might just be the exact solution you're looking for. We are doing a deep dive into the ultimate two-step framework for skill acquisition. And look, this isn't some cheap life hack. It's a fundamental truth about human neurobiology that can literally save you months or even years of total frustration when you're trying to master something new.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the ultimate learning formula, the engine, power of consistency, the steering wheel, active iteration, the lion's learning cycle, how to build consistency, and finally, the art of correction.
So starting right off with part 1, the ultimate learning formula and why most people inevitably hit a wall.
I want you to think about a skill you're currently stuck on right now. Maybe it's playing the guitar, speaking French, trying to grow a YouTube channel, whatever it is. Why do we actually fail to learn these new skills? To really get this, let me share a super fascinating story from our source material about two English language students who both completely failed but for totally opposite reasons.
Okay, so on the left, we've got student A. She showed up to class for 2 solid years. Unbelievable consistency. But she had this terrible habit. Instead of saying, I agree, she would say, I am agree. And every single session, her teacher would point it out, write it down on the board, and ask her to fix it. And every single session, she'd completely ignore the feedback and just say, I am agree, all over again. 2 years later, absolutely zero progress. She had consistency, sure, but zero correction. Now on the right, we have student B. This guy was incredibly sharp. When the teacher gave him a correction, he fixed it instantly on the spot. But after just 5 or 6 sessions, he got frustrated. He wanted a magic shortcut, He wanted fluency practically overnight. And when he realized it actually takes time to absorb the culture of the language, he just quit. So he had the correction, but absolutely zero consistency.
So, here is the absolutely crucial point. Mastery requires what we call a dual-pillar framework. You absolutely, 100% must have consistency, which is your forward motion, paired directly with iteration, which is active correction. Doing one without the other is entirely useless. Think about it. If you only iterate but quit after a week, you go nowhere. But if you're incredibly consistent and never fix your mistakes, well, you're just repeating the same error 1,000 times expecting a different result. They are both absolutely mandatory.
Let's transition over to part 2, the engine, power of consistency, and how it fuels your forward motion.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we're talking about. Imagine you're sitting in a car. Consistency, that's your gas pedal and your tires. It's the sheer, raw energy that actually propels the vehicle forward down the road. Without the gas pedal, you're just sitting in a parked car making vroom noises. But iteration is your steering wheel. It's how you actually navigate, turn down side streets, and avoid roadblocks. If you have gas but no steering wheel, you are going to crash straight into a wall. If you have a steering wheel but no gas, you're never even leaving the driveway. You gotta have both to actually get anywhere.
But why is consistency so uniquely important? Our source uses this really beautiful metaphor, the garden. When you try to learn a skill super fast by just skimming a few books, you're basically standing completely outside the garden looking in. You're just memorizing dry, boring definitions. But when you are consistent over a long period of time, you actually walk inside the garden. You begin to intuitively understand the unwritten culture of the skill. You build real credibility. Because let's face it, in today's AI-driven world, literally anyone can generate definitions in 2 seconds. But what you absolutely cannot fake is the authenticity and the true creativity that only comes from spending years walking inside the garden of your chosen craft.
There's this brilliant concept to keep in mind here. Consistency is the art of returning, not just continuing. It is not about doing some crazy 24-hour sprint. It's about waking up the next day and the next and actively choosing to come back to the work. Think about a legendary football player like Zinedine Zidane, right? His credibility didn't happen overnight. It comes from decades of returning to the pitch. Or think about your own deepest relationships, or those wildly successful YouTube channels. They all rely on an exponential compound effect, and you don't get a compound effect from a 2-day burst. You get it from the lifelong art of returning.
All right, let's shift our focus to part 3, the steering wheel, active iteration, and exactly why blind repetition is a massive trap.
Now, you've probably heard of Malcolm Gladwell's super famous 10,000-hour rule. This whole idea that you just need to put in 10,000 hours to master literally anything. Well, we really need to push back on that right now. Time spent without active correction is simply time wasted.
If you go out and practice swinging a golf club with terrible form for 10,000 hours, you're not magically going to become Tiger Woods. You are just going to permanently ingrain a completely terrible golf swing. Repetition without iteration is a total trap.
And this brings us to a pretty harsh reality about learning. On the left, we see what scammers have been selling us for decades, these quick hacks, like playing a tape of French vocabulary while you sleep, promising effortless fluency by morning. Guys, this is a complete myth. The reality on the right is that true learning physically forces your brain to build entirely new neural pathways. It demands that you recognize a flaw, confront it, and consciously solve a new problem. And honestly, that's inherently uncomfortable. It literally drains your physical energy. If your learning process feels completely effortless, you probably aren't iterating, which means sadly, you probably aren't actually learning.
Let's move to and see how this builds into part 4, the lion's learning cycle, which is all about action followed by evaluation.
The entrepreneur Naval Ravikant uses a really brilliant animal metaphor for this. As humans, we have this terribly flawed tendency to try and learn linearly. Like you see on the left, we just put our heads down and march forward endlessly, grinding away without ever stopping to actually check the map. But look at the lion's approach on the right. A lion does not jog slowly all day long. A lion hunts with explosive, aggressive action. And then, and this is the crucial part, it sits under a tree to rest, digest, and evaluate what just happened. That cycle of intense action followed by intentional rest, that is the real secret to human mastery.
So what does this cycle actually look like for us in practice? It breaks down into 4 really clear steps. First, you attempt the skill. You take that explosive action. Second, you gather feedback to see exactly where you messed up. Third, you actively correct that specific error. And fourth, you repeat the cycle. And hey, a really vital note here. Sleep and dedicated rest periods, that is your sitting under the tree phase. That is when your brain actually processes these iterations and solidifies all those brand new neural pathways. You need the downtime just as much as the action itself. So how do we actually pull this off? Let's pivot to part 5, how to build consistency, looking at some deeply practical steps to make sure you actually stay in the game.
If you really want to be consistent, you got to follow these rules. First off, control your initial energy. Do not decide you're going to study a new language for 10 hours straight on day 1. You will instantly burn out. You have to demand less of yourself initially just to build a habit. Second, deeply know your underlying why, because if you don't have a real reason, you're just going to quit the second it gets hard. Third, join a community. Doing things alone is fast, sure, but doing them together is what makes you last. And finally, completely drop the perfectionism. Perfectionism is literal poison here. You have to fully embrace being a flawed beginner who is entirely willing to fail publicly.
Finally, let's move to part 6, the art of correction, and how to properly master your feedback loop.
Okay, the very first rule of correction is getting the right kind of feedback. And reality check, polite encouragement from your friends or your mom is not going to help you here. You need ruthless, brutal, honest feedback. So where do you get that? From the free market or from the laws of nature? The market is going to tell you instantly if your business idea is good, because people will either pull out their credit cards or they won't. And the laws of nature? They absolutely will not negotiate with you. In fact, the speaker in our source material realized this so deeply that he actually decided to enroll in a physics class at age 30, just to reground himself in the brutal, honest reality of how the universe actually works. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this fascinating strategy for fixing your flaws, drastically shortening your feedback loops. Don't wait an entire month to review your progress. Review it today. But here is the absolute most important rule. Fix only one specific thing at a time. Seriously, if you try to fix 100 flaws all at once, your brain will just freeze up. Pick one tiny flaw. Fix it. And then, once that one tiny thing is working smoothly, you lock it in. It becomes your new foundation, and you build your next iteration right on top of it.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to break the fourth wall here and ask you directly, what skill are you trying to learn right now? And honestly, which of the 2 pillars are you currently missing? Are you student A, endlessly consistent but secretly terrified of real correction? Or are you student B, super sharp but totally lacking patience? Diagnose your own roadblock today, apply this exact formula, and really ask yourself, once you finally stop getting in your own way, what are you truly capable of mastering? Thanks so much for learning with us today, and we'll see you in the next explainer.